is another Thriving Thursday here, and we have today actually Chris Wikman, who has been doing a lot of breathing practices himself, exploring for health, and he can introduce himself a bit more. Breathing is one of the things that is really one of the foundational aspects, one of the pillars, cornerstones to health. And I think a lot of us have been recently reading some books about breath work. Of course, I've been doing a lot of that over the years, but this is just a renewed, interest in this. And we know there's so many ways to breathe, so many different types of breathing, maybe a lot of information out there. So we're going to kind of distill it down a bit today. Chris will do that, and I'll be here to support him. And great to have everyone here. Great to see everyone. So I will do a couple of slides, and then I'll stop sharing and have Chris share his screen. So we have a Facebook group called Capital Integrated Health Community. Would love to have you on there and join us there. It's a private group, but if you kind of come on there and ask for the, to be invited on there, we'll definitely do that. Love to see you there. Next, July 22nd, so in 2 weeks, we have Dr. Hiza and Emil, CIH, talk about addressing pain with physical therapy. And we know that's a huge, aspect of health. And I think not just pain, but also musculoskeletal health in general, structural health. So love to see you there. Looking forward to that one a lot. I think next week is kind of a kind of an open space opportunity. I think during the summertime, it's a bit more, that should say July 15th, a bit more fluid. So if anyone has suggestions on what to do for next week, or if you want to hear about certain things we're doing in the clinic or whatnot, just please write in there. I think we're pretty open to that. So it could be a, listener created webinar if you'd like. So if anyone at all has any suggestions, just type them in the chat there, and we'd love to hear what you would like to hear next week. If you want to break from the summertime webinars, we could totally take a break next week too, up to you. So that's fine. So we will go with introducing Chris here, and I will turn it over to Chris. Chris, thank you so much for being here today.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Wang. So again, I'm Chris Wikman. I'm a patient of Dr. Wang's practice. I've been with him for quite a while, and a little bit of my background. I'm a retired engineer and now a full-time musician and artist. I'm also somewhat self-taught in health and medicine for my own purposes, and glad to share this material with you today. So we're going to, and yeah, you see my screen, right? Okay. So a bit of an introduction. We're going to talk about breathing practices. Many people breathe what's known as unnaturally. We'll talk about why that is. So we'll introduce you to some of those practices, and also give a shout out to James Nestor's book from last year called Breath. Really excellent book, and much of the material in there inspired me. Okay, so what's breathing unnaturally? The strongest issue with most people's breathing practice is breathing through the mouth rather than through your nostrils. And I'm also going to assume that everyone's pretty much aware that you should breathe with your abdomen most of the times and not just your chest. So you might ask, who says this is breathing unnaturally? If you look back in ancient writings, Tibetan Buddhists, ancient Egyptian texts, the Chinese Taoist canon, specifically primordial breath, these cultures all talk about how it was important to breathe through your nose. And also, as we'll talk about, breathing slowly. There's many different practices. We'll get into some of the pranayama. Many of you probably are practicing yoga, but what's not widely known is the earliest forms of yoga actually were more focused on breathing practices for health rather than the series of poses and stretching that's common, such as in the, I think, Visnaya form of yoga. Andrew Weil, most of us know of him, a famous integrative medicine doctor. He's been quoted as his single strongest health advice is to avoid mouth breathing. And a lot of the ancient writings, again, they talk about those who breathe slowly through their nose will eliminate all health problems. So maybe an overstatement, but there's a lot of growing medical evidence. Wim Hof, he's done some amazing things, demonstrations using something called Tumo breathing, and we'll talk about that. He ran a shirtless, shoeless half marathon in the Arctic without suffering hypothermia. And we'll talk about the developing Western medical research, which is now demonstrating and confirming the benefits of some of these practices. So the question comes up, why do we mouth breathe? So one theory is that as our diets have changed in the last couple 100 years, we tend to eat more processed foods, which are soft and require less chewing. There's some, I guess, research that many years ago, people would spend up to an hour and a half chewing each day. And that led to much stronger muscles in your jaw and stronger bone structure as well. And so by having weaker muscles in jaw, it can lead to narrowing of your palate and your jaw. And this will tend to constrict your nasal passages and make it harder to breathe, and also more likely for nasal congestion to cause difficulties in nasal breathing. There's also some growing evidence that tooth extraction for orthodontics, I myself had this, can lead to jaw narrowing. As you pull the teeth out, things come together, and that again narrows everything. So there does appear to be some revolution in orthodontics developing because of that growing realization. So quick to the chat, what do you do to do with mouth breathing? So you want to breathe through your nostrils, and we'll talk more about that. And also, I see I mentioned Patrick McEwen. Yeah, we're gonna talk about him too. So what is it about the nose that makes nasal breathing better than mouth breathing? So the nose is a pretty complex structure, the cavities and nasal passages. So as the breath goes through a quite complex system of passages, there are these, the lining is covered by these cilia, these micro hairs that are actually a continuing conveyor belt of sorts of mucus. And this mucus traps particles and irritants and continually cycles them as a waste product. In addition, the air is warmed and moisturized via these nasal turbinates, a structure in your sinuses. And so that type of structure and process is not in your mouth and in your throat, leading to your lungs. So the nose does a better job of handling that. In addition, when you breathe out, water loss from oral excitation is much greater than what would come out through your nose. Your nose will tend to capture some of that moisture and recycle it. So these lead to health benefits, and the actual mechanisms are still being studied, but there appears to be a process where a slower breathing, and therefore you might be breathing in deeper or breathing out more deeply. There's a stretching that goes on, and this leads to some inhibition of some signals, which tends to improve the coherence of your cardio, respiratory, and brain neural structure working together. All right, so here's a partial list of some of the benefits of nostril breathing and the other techniques which we'll talk about. So it appears that through probably a balancing of your autonomic nervous system and other methods, increased nitric oxide is released, which will tend to dilate your blood vessels and lead to lower blood pressure. You may get better sleep, increase your heart rate variability. So for those of those who are not aware, heart rate variability, this is where your your autonomic nervous system will speed up and slow down your heart depending on the needs of whatever you're doing. And the quicker, in effect, that your body reacts to these things, the higher heart rate variability. So athletes, for example, will have very, very high numbers in these ranges. And circulation will improve, improved fitness and endurance. We'll talk about Dr. John Duyard, who did some studies on this. Also, interestingly, not expected on my part, there was a study that talked about childhood mouth breathing has been correlated with increased risk of dermatitis. That was very curious. And then also you go back all the way back to 1890 in the American Journal of Dental Science. They found that mouth breathing is associated with more tooth decay. So it was quite interesting. Okay, so we'll get into some of the techniques, variations that you can use for different purposes and generally improved health. Just a bit of caution, some of these, specifically Tumo breathing, Wim Hof uses this and popularized it. That can lead to dizziness and even temporary blackout. So at least for that one, practice it in a safe place, not certainly while you're driving. Also, breathing more slowly can lead to some potential dizziness. So go slow, work up to these. So nostril breathing versus mouth breathing. There was an interesting informal study, which was talked about in James Nestor's book. There's another fellow, Anders Olsen from Scandinavia. He a self-professed world breathing expert and also an inventor and researcher. And they subjected themselves to an interesting 10-day crossover study where their nostrils were actually blocked full-time for 10 days. And they did some exercise. They ate a controlled diet. They did blood pressure readings. There were cultures, nasal cultures taken of bacteria, many different health measurements during that period. At the end of the 10 days, they blocked their mouth except while they were eating and enforced nasal breathing. And there was quite a difference between the two periods. They had sleep apnea in the first period, which virtually went away during the second section. There were growing infections in their nasal cavities while they were blocked. They developed hypertension. So quite an interesting experiment there. So nasal breathing, we talked about possibly is behind changes in jaw and nasal cavity structure. There's been some ongoing perception in the nasal community or medical community that you can't grow new bone after 30 years of age. But Mr. Nestor, after this study, he also wore a palate expander for I think about a year to help improve his narrow jaw and nasal structure. And they did a before and after imaging of his facial bones, and then had Mayo Clinic take a look at this. And they did verify there was significant new bone growth as a result of this, which was quite interesting. And in fact, if you look at human skulls anywhere from 200 years ago and on back to early times, they seem to have larger nasal cavities, wider jaws, straighter teeth than modern men. So pretty interesting. It seems like something we're doing is causing this issue to develop and leading to mouth breathing, unfortunately. The age of the guy with bone growth, I don't recall exactly. I believe he's probably in his 40s. Not positive about that.
And yeah, I know in the book it says that people can grow new bone up until the 70s, if not possibly even beyond that. I think it says that in the book there.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so now we'll talk about slower and paused or breath holding. So many of us breathe somewhere in the range of 8 to 15 breaths per minute. I know from some fitness devices I wear that when I'm sleeping, my overnight breathing is in the range of 15 breaths per minute. But they do find that if you can slow your breathing through practice down to the range of 5 to 7, this will lead to health improvements. Even occasional daily practice will help in this area. So on the chart here, we have a little graph from a 2001 study where Dr. Bernardi looked at heart rate variability versus different breathing rates. And he found that it peaked somewhere in the range of 6 breaths per minute, which is really interesting. So we'll talk about more about that. Fully exhaling can help also slow your breathing rate, focusing on that. So when we don't fully exhale, there's actually a missed opportunity. There is some release of toxins into your lungs, and when you fully exhale, it can help to release those toxins through your breath. And so there's an opportunity there to fully exhale, at least occasionally, and get used to that, fully exercising your lungs. Many of us have grown used to just chest breathing, and when you use your abdomen, you fully inhale and exhale. It can help to exercise the lungs, clear out all those passages. So breath holding also can help with health benefits. So what you might try when you're exercising is occasionally just holding your breath and working up to longer and longer breath holds. Anders Olsen, who we talked about in that 10-day crossover study, he practices this and is a big proponent of that. So that can help, and studies have shown you can improve your VO2 max, which is a indicator of how much oxygen your body can use in exercising. The more the better. And so higher VO2 max is often associated with better endurance with cardio exercise. And even during light exercise, you can practice this. So when you do hold your breath, you will introduce probably eventually hypoxia. So this is starving your cells of oxygen. When you get below 85% perfusion, or I guess oxygen content versus normal at around 95 to 100%. This will trigger some adaptive responses in your body. So it'll increase your EPO, which in turn will increase your hemoglobin. And bike racers have been caught illegally having EPO introduced into their bloodstream to increase their oxygen content. So when you are exercising, you get more oxygen into your muscles. But if you can encourage your body to do this naturally, it's good for your health. So the hypoxia will also reduce your blood pressure. It also will favor stem cell migration. So stem cells have been in the news a lot lately. It can help with organ repair and regeneration. And so this is a very interesting thing in my mind. Also, P53 is a biochemical which is involved in the process of repairing DNA breaks and mutations. So when you encourage that, you can reduce your cancer risk. So very interesting things involved in this. In addition, breath holding can increase your tolerance to carbon dioxide in your breath. So there's some developing research in this area where people subject to panic attacks or anxiety issues, if you can increase your tolerance to higher CO2 in your blood, it can actually help reduce your levels of anxiety and the likelihood of panic attacks. So there are some labs you can go to where they will have you breathe momentarily to air with higher content of CO2, and it can be very difficult. Even though your oxygen is not going down, your body may go into panic. but through exposure in this, it can be an interesting process. All right, so now we're going to do a little group practice. So this blue circle on the screen, this is going to be expanding and contracting, and so we will practice synchronized slow breathing. This is going to be about 6 breaths per minute. So when I click on this, you're going to want to be ready to breathe in. So let's go. So this may be difficult initially. It may bring a little bit of dizziness, but you know, you can just lie in a quiet area and practice this, and it'll bring on relaxation and all the benefits we talked about. So comment from Margaret. That's actually great. If your breathing rate is less than 6 per minute, that's fabulous. I assume that's been brought about by practice and not other, like, could be some people have a low breathing stimulus, but that's great.
I think what she might be saying, the exercise is increasing her breathing rate. One of the things is that we want to count slower than we think, right? I mean, that's what it seems like. Most people, including myself, tend to breathe faster than we think. So having a slow count, however slow people can do it is good. Great. Yeah, where can people find this ball online? Is it at the slide?
So this is this is in the slides. So I believe this webinar is being recorded, so you could go to Dr. Wang's YouTube channel where you can find this. But also, we'll talk about in a few minutes an app called HeartMath, which you can actually adjust. It's a guided feedback breathing practice app, and you can also use that.
Does the size of the person, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Oh, does the size of the person or lung size affect the ability to breathe at this pace? From Joe.
So I've not heard of that. It's certainly possible that the size of your lungs may have something to do with that, but I suspect not.
I think what it is it will probably increase total lung capacity if you have bigger lungs anatomically, but in terms of the pace should not be affected because the pace is under voluntary control. I don't see how that would make a difference there.
Yeah, I may go back to Dr. Bernardi's paper and look into what the population was on that and whether they controlled for you know, physical size, lung size, things like that. Yeah, but I do believe that it's more of a you know, autonomic system, you know, dependency.
Yeah.
So more about this. The paper referenced here, Physiological Effects of Slow Breathing, covers a lot of material and highly recommended. Someone mentioned earlier, Patrick McEwen. Yeah, he's a great speaker and author. His website has a lot of interesting information. And then there's a curious fellow who originally came out of Russia, Buteyko. He's had some really interesting success with asthmatics and teaching them to breathe more slowly, which has improved their asthma symptoms. I myself was an asthmatic when I was a child, and I did go to some clinics which Probably, I'm sure they taught me to do abdominal breathing and possibly slower breathing. But if you know someone or you have asthmatic, definitely look into his practices. I believe he has a website, a lot of material. But he says most people breathe too much. He thinks we actually take in more oxygen than we really need. Okay, so another question from Margaret. Pausing, we'll talk about that upcoming. Good segue. So first, we're going to talk about alternate nostril breathing. So this is one of the pranayama techniques. I think there's actually at least 8 different pranayama techniques and combinations. So this one, Nadi Shodhyana, means channel purification. And there are actually different variations of varying which nostrils. So this can lower stress levels, heart rate, blood pressure, balance your autonomic nervous system. So we're going to practice this as well together. So when I click on this, you're going to hold your left nostril, and we're going to take a few breaths in and out through the left nostril, and then we're going to switch. Again, this is timed at 6 breaths per minute. Now we're going to switch. So there are variations on this, breathing in one, out the other, etc., for different purposes. And the references I'll provide at the end can lead you to those variations, more details, including online videos to help you practice those. And some of you may have noticed that it's easier to breathe in one versus the other. That actually varies during the day according to a varying cycle. So hi, Sarah. If one nostril is almost completely clogged, I think the best thing to do there is work on just breathing in and out through both nostrils. So the research seems to show that the more you do nostril breathing, the more your nasal passages will become healthier. And this should lead to less congestion and opening those, and make it easier and easier over time to do this alternate nostril breathing. So that's what I would suggest if they're often clogged, is just practice through both nostrils until it becomes easier. Okay, so this is where we'll talk about breath holding during each cycle. So this is known as box breathing, 4-4-4-4. So each of these is 4 seconds. So this can reduce your stress levels, improve your mood, improve your stress resistance. So basically we're going to inhale, hold, exhale, and then hold again and cycle. And again, this may make you a little bit dizzy, so work up to slowly. So we're going to follow this red ball on the screen. It's going to cycle around the box. So again, we're first going to be ready to inhale. Oh, sorry. Not sure. Oh, I'm going to click in the box. Okay. Okay, again, so you can practice this when you're feeling stressed and maybe a little bit off mood. Just get somewhere quiet and practice for a few minutes. Another technique is Andrew Weil's 478 or whoosh breathing, and I borrowed this animation from a prior webinar from Dr. Wang. So wait for this to cycle. Basically, we're going to breathe in and then hold and then breathe out. So this can be a nice technique if, for example, you're on an airplane, a little bit nervous about air travel. Just close your eyes and practice this for a little bit, and can help you bring you into a deep state of relaxation, hopefully. Okay, now this is kind of the opposite of some of the ones we've talked about, Tumo breathing or inner fire. Tibetan Buddhist monks have used this for a long time when they're up in the mountains in cold areas to survive. They may go up in there and meditate and need to increase their body heat, which has been they've shown they can do in studies. We're not going to practice this here because it takes a little while and it can cause you to temporarily black out. But basically, and I practiced this. Basically, you will hyperventilate for 30 cycles, and then you'll breathe out, and then take a deep breath in and hold it. And this will bring you to and you're going to hold it as long as you can. It'll bring you to a hypoxic state. I've worn a pulse oximeter doing this and brought my oxygen levels down to the high 50s, which was very curious, took a little practice. So this can, Wim Hof, for example, used this to increase his body's sympathetic drive, increasing the adrenaline, increasing body heat. And he's not known as the Iceman. He sat in a ice bath for, I believe, almost 2 hours, which was a world record, and without suffering from hypothermia. Very, very interesting and well-publicized demonstrations. Using this technique, he also had himself injected with a E. coli toxin, which can be very dangerous. Breathes on fever, nausea, vomiting, headaches. And he basically just sat there for a few minutes and seemed fine, and then got up, went for a cup of coffee. Very curious. There's some growing evidence also that practicing this can help with autoimmune conditions. So his website has some free training classes, and they're also very extensive, in-depth ones for a fee. Other people as well have started offering classes in this. So very, very curious process here, but be careful with it. So question from the audience, using, I believe, a CPAP machine. So, apnea is different from, temporarily doing hypoxia. CPAP machines are used at night to hopefully control apnea by positive pressure. I have not seen the studies yet on how that will affect your autonomic nervous system, but certainly some curious lines of thought there. There is some line of thought that with improving your breathing practices, it can lead to some remodeling of the nasal structures, and hopefully reduce the need for sleep apnea devices at night, whether an oral appliance or the CPAP machine and other techniques. I think a lot of times you may need a palate expanding device as well, which can take a while. But certainly a lot of interest and developing research and evidence in these areas. So if you do have sleep apnea, definitely strongly encourage these practices. So we talked about what can you use that's available to help guide you with these controlled cyclic breathing practices at a certain rate. So Dr. Wang had a previous webinar on this, and I believe there are also upcoming ones as well. HeartMath is a combination device and app for a smartphone. I have this myself and use it. Basically, it clips on your earlobe and can measure your heart rate and heart rate variability, and basically through a Bluetooth connection to your phone, it guides you through, and you can see on the screen a little video of the app. It kind of guides you to a certain rate of breathing, which you can adjust as needed, and then it tracks your heart rate variability and brings you into what they call resonance between your heart and your lungs and your nervous system, and basically can improve your mood and reduce your stress. And eventually, people who use this quite a lot can bring themselves into this breathing process and state without even using the app. But very curious device, and I found it helpful. Mouth taping. This is a very curious, when somebody first told me about this, I was skeptical, and I was like, interesting. But I actually have tried this and use it. So basically the thought is when you're sleeping and it's hard to encourage yourself to breathe through your nose, if you put a little piece of tape on your mouth, you don't have to put all the way across or any duct tape or things like that. This 3M brand of NextCare tape I've found, and also been recommended by others, works well. It comes off easily. Just a little piece across here. You can leave a little gap in your mouth if you want to have a small gap for comfort. And initially, you'll find this. You'll fight it during the night. You'll want to take it off, but you can work up to wearing it through the night. And I have to say, I definitely find that wearing this the full night definitely feel different in the morning, no doubt. So this again is towards encouraging you to develop nasal breathing practices and not breathing through your mouth.
Chris, have you ever tried the, I haven't tried it yet, but the Somnifix? It's another mouth taping.
I have not, although I do use breathe right strips at night, and even sometimes exercising. You'll see athletes, football players, bike racers wear the nasal strips, but I've not used the Somnifix.
I'll try it and let you know at some point. Elaine is saying it works great as well, the mouth taping.
Okay, yeah, another adherent. So that's it for the practices. There's certainly a lot more, which I'll point you to shortly. So a couple of interesting tidbits we'll leave you with. So little did you knows. So we talked about the breathing rate, and it turns out that somewhere in the range of 5.5 to 6 breaths per minute, it actually corresponds to the cadence and call rates of prayers, chants, and rites around the world, many different religious and mystical practices, which is very curious. So they seem to have self-discovered that this rate where the call and response brings you into a longer period of coherence and may explain how these positive feelings coming out of service. Very curious here, and that this has been going on since well before the medical research looked at heart rate variability versus breathing rate. Very curious. We talked about nostril breathing and how one of them can appear either partially or fully blocked during the day. So recent research has actually confirmed that this is normal, somewhere between, and it varies between different people, somewhere between a couple hours and 8 hours is the cycle during the day. So that's quite normal. Another really interesting thing, again, how the ancients figured this out is quite curious, but the left nostril actually will trigger your parasympathetic nervous system, part of the autonomic, the rest and digest or the brake pedal part. And then on the other side, the right nostril, that will trigger the sympathetic fight or flight, the so-called gas pedal. So I've not dug down into how this works. Certainly the vagus nerve, which is associated with the parasympathetic, I believe it's symmetric in the body, but I'm not sure why breathing in that side yet causes that. Okay, a few more. So since the ancient yoga practitioners knew about this left versus right, yogis have been known to lie on their left side, which apparently encourages right nostril breathing by lying on your side. And that triggers the sympathetic and somehow increases your digestion. I'm not sure I understand how that works, but very curious. So if you possibly have post-meal digestion issues, you might try this, lying on your left side. And it also, there's some evidence that it may reduce acid reflux. Very interesting. I think also gravity on your abdominal organs may have something to do with that. Not sure. We talked about the American Plains Indians. Also were aware of the benefits of avoiding mouth breathing. So they would, with their infants, they would hold their lips of their children together while they were sleeping at times to encourage them to breathe through your nostrils. And also when they were carrying them, they would position their heads in a manner that made it more difficult to breathe through the mouths and then encourage nostril breathing. We talked about how the jaw muscles in humans seem to have gotten weaker in the last couple hundred years. What I didn't know is that your masseter jaw muscle is actually pound for pound the strongest muscle in your body. Curious. So these breathing practices, you can definitely improve your lung capacity. And this is actually a good thing. So the Framingham study in the 80s, well-known, very large cardiorespiratory study. The researchers did some further looking and discovered that your lung capacity is a better indicator of lifespan than your diet, than your genetics, or the amount of exercise that you get. Very curious. So James Nestor also wrote a book about free diving and holding breath and how that can increase your lung capacity. So another interesting book by that author, and apparently can help with your health. All right, so we'll do a little bit of wrap up here. So just to summarize, breathe through your nose, not your mouth. You can practice these techniques as little as 5 to 10 minutes a day. I have done that, and I notice I have a what's called a Whoop fitness strap, which looks at heart rate and resting heart rate overnight, heart rate variability, your sleep quality. And in the morning, you log certain things that you did the prior day, excuse me, such as conscious breath work, acupuncture, sauna, as well as it logs the level of activity through monitoring your heart rate full time. And it'll actually tell you over the period of a few months whether your morning recovery the next day improved or got worse. And there's definitely a positive correlation in my breath work between doing that one day and my recovery and health numbers the next morning. So quite curious. And then further resources. So John Duyard, he has a great website, Life Spa, includes a blog, and he has a YouTube channel. So if you search on pranayama on his YouTube page, there's many, many videos on the different breathing practices we've covered here and more. He was a former coach to many top athletes, such as Billie Jean King. He did research on distance runners, teaching them to breathe through their noses, and actually some of them, their breathing rates while exercise actually stayed constant rather than this huffing and puffing through their mouth at high rates, which was very curious. And they improved their times in running. Breath, we talked about that breath book, highly rated, many reviews, well annotated bibliography. If you go on his website, there's even an enlarged version of the bibliography with a lot of additional information and references. Hatha yoga. So this is the, focuses on the physical part. I actually have a book from 1932 by a fellow who spent time in India and learned many of these practices. So Hatha yoga includes many of these breathing practices and further exercise practices. Wim Hof, we talked about that, his website. You can go there for free short training videos on this Tumo breathing, Anders Olsen, and Patrick McEwen. Just a final note, so I've included these PMID numbers to some of the medical papers. So for those of you not familiar with this, PubMed, which is a NIH, National Institute of Health website, they have a searchable database of medical papers. So the ones I've included here, you can go and look those IDs up and find those medical papers.
Thank you so much, Chris. And I think there was a question about, is it possible to have a copy of the presentation? Are you okay with that? We could share it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Sure. Be happy to.
Great. Let's see. How do we? Probably I could email you, and then that's probably the way to get it. If anyone wants a copy, I know we have a recording on Facebook typically. Jen, who's on vacation right now, but she's going to put this on the presentation on Facebook, so it's a public website. You can go on and look, and then I know there's probably people watching on Facebook right now as well, so you can record that. Yeah, the recording of this presentation will be available on Facebook and on our YouTube channel. Okay, one more, I think. Let's see, a couple more. Oh, have you heard about using the didgeridoo, which is an Australian, Aboriginal Australian wind instrument, helping with throat muscle tone and sleep apnea? That's interesting.
Yeah, I've not heard a lot about that, but I would have little doubt. I actually know an energy healer, and she actually she's also a fellow musician, and she and her husband make didgeridoos and have classes, and yeah, I would have little doubt that there's benefits to that.
Are they local, Chris? The people that do the didgeridoos, or?
She is, so I'm in Maryland, and she's in the Frederick, Maryland area.
Okay. So yes, local. Maryland is local. So can you email me that? I'm interested in that to talk.
Will do.
Great, thank you.
Question about the Whoop strap versus the Fitbit. So I have, so I have a Fitbit, I have an Oura Ring, and I have a Whoop strap, which I'm currently evaluating. It's hard to say which I would recommend. None of them do everything that I like. I have a Garmin Phoenix top end for when I do some mountaineering. It has a pulse oximeter built into it. The Whoop strap you actually rent versus buy. So if you're not ready to make an investment, although the Fitbit is not expensive, the Whoop strap you rent. A lot of top athletes use it because what the Whoop strap will do for you is it helps you guide your training. If you do a lot of training, you can look at how you did overnight, and it will guide you whether to go it easy or harder. The Oura Ring does some of that. I like the Fitbit because it records my steps, and I have several years worth of steps data. You do have to pay extra for the Fitbit premium version of the app, which I've not tried. That appears to have more things that will overlap with the Oura Ring. So it depends on what your needs and goals are for each of those.
Yeah, they all have a lot of benefit. Yeah, like you said. Peggy says, do any of these techniques decrease snoring? Any of the breathing techniques that you reviewed today?
So there is evidence that that nostril breathing is associated with less snoring. I don't think there's any doubt about that. The issue, of course, people, the chicken and the egg. So people will tend to snore because of partly because of nasal congestion and the tissue in there can be inflamed and swollen. But I believe that if you can work on nostril breathing, while you're awake, it can help improve the health of your nasal passages and reduce snoring. I don't think there's any doubt about that. It may take a while.
The other thing is positioning. I mean, this is another chicken or egg thing, but my understanding is if you're sleeping on, multiple pillows at night, which people might need for reflux or just for comfort or whatnot, but it does a couple things. It probably increases cervical forward flexion, but it also decreases airway diameter. And so there might be an issue with sleeping on too many pillows at night, which might cause more snoring. I'm not sure if you've experimented with that yourself or versus flat, not sleeping on any pillow at all, things like that.
Yeah, I tend to use a single flat pillow and try to sleep on my side.
Yeah.
I have also occasionally try to do without a pillow, but that's difficult. I think just a side comment. Sleeping due to digestion issues with several pillows is a complex issue. Hopefully, many of you are aware that acid reflux and indigestion can sometimes be due to not enough stomach acid rather than too much.
Right.
So possibly part of a different or even previous webinar on that. But
actually, there's some physiology behind that we were talking about this week in the clinic. When there's low stomach acid, there's an increase in, or rather, when there's low stomach acid, there's a decrease in lower esophageal sphincter tone, which means that the sphincter that separates the esophagus and stomach is basically more leaky. And so that's like a leaky valve almost. And so there might be not enough stomach acid, but there might be too much in the esophagus from the leaky sphincter due to the low stomach acid, which is kind of an interesting point.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, so you can have too much stomach acid in one area, but not enough in another area, basically. Is there a correlation between Monica said her daughter sucked her thumb until a certain age? I don't know what age that was, but needed jaw surgery because her mouth didn't accommodate her tongue, and the top of the mouth didn't align with the bottom teeth. She's had lots of congestion. Sounds like there's a correlation there. Yeah.
Yeah, I believe there is. So, another aspect about mouth breathing, there's also some theories. I don't know how strong the evidence is, but
I think you can stop sharing your screen if you want.
Sure. So I guess there's at least some still communities and even evidence in earlier times, people continued breastfeeding for longer into the infant's age. And the theory goes that tended to build up the infant's jaw muscles and therefore it encouraged keeping the jaw wide. So not sure how strong that evidence is, but it's really a curious theory.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think it does make sense.
Keeping the tongue on your roof of your mouth, there's certainly some breathing practices that include that. I have practiced Tai Chi off and on for several years, and during part of the standing meditation, we would focus on doing that as part of our breathing. So yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think the book also talks about how it's basically keeping the airway open and also slowly but surely remodeling your airways to be more open when you keep your tongue right behind your two front teeth and you're touching that, and you're not like just letting it sit there, and you're almost like consciously putting on your soft palate, I believe. So yeah, that's great. Well, thank you so much. It's 1 o'clock now. Thank you all for staying for this long. And breath work is a big part of health. So we just want to wish Chris a big thanks again for coming on today.
Thank you.
Yes, looks like other people want to know about the Frederick didgeridoo contact. Yes.
Okay, I can share her name, Alexandra Windsong, but I'll provide. She has a website. Again, Alexandra Windsong.
That's a very appropriate musical name, Windsong.
Yes. She's an interesting person. Has a strong research medical background, and now she does energy healing and music.
Cool. Here's the link for everyone that wants it. There
you go.
All right. Well, next week, like I said, we kind of have an open week. So it looks like some people want to talk about experientials for resetting the limbic system. And we can kind of have a improv, kind of a spontaneous session if that's okay with everyone. We can talk about some various aspects of health. Some people wanted to talk about sauna, red light therapy. I thought it would be helpful to talk about COVID-19 updates, or at least be available for any questions that way. So I could do that, and just happy to be on there, be a service if that's helpful for people. Thank you so much, Chris, and we'll be in touch soon, and have a great rest of the day, everyone. And Christine, I'm not sure if Christine is on here. You're subbing for Jen here, but I think we have to actually stop the webinar somehow. We could continue. We could do a 24/7 marathon webinar here, I guess. Thank you, everyone.
Okay. The presentation is pretty big. It's about 50 megabytes. So I'll talk about how to transfer that.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
A PDF, would be smaller, but it wouldn't include the animations.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we can talk about it. We can try to figure. I'd probably talk to Jen. She can probably.
Yeah, I can do a Google Doc share or whatever.
Yeah. Either way, that should be fine.
All right.
All right. Thank you all. Good to see you. Thanks for the comments. Appreciate it. Have a great rest of your day.